and also the National Vice Chief for Keadilan Youth. And he's currently our Keadilan Communications Director on the national level. And then on my second to the left, it's Mr. Azra Azwa.
The actual economist.
The actual economist. So Mr. Azrul, he was formerly part of the Selangor administration, and he was advisor to former Menteri Besar Tan Sri Khalid Ibrahim, and he was involved in most of the research and advisory role for the Selangor budget in the past. So today we are going to hear it from him as well. Feel free to ask him questions even regarding about the current Selangor administration and whether it's heading in the right direction. Okay. The third panelist is Wabi Nur Izzah, Member of Parliament for Lembah Pantai. She's also currently the Vice President of Parti Keadilan Rakyat, and she's also our Election Director. So co-election director, we have two. So that alongside with Datuk Saifuddin Nasution. So today we're going to hear from three of them on our budget for Malaysia, and maybe make a comparison with Penang and Selangor budget. We'll see. It's great. Right. So our Prime Minister Datuk Sri Najib has called that our budget 2018 is the mother of all budget. And Penang calls it a budget for the many. Selangor has no tagline, but I believe it's people-oriented budget. And Pakatan Harapan's alternative budget, the tagline is spend wisely, cut taxes, choose hope. So let's hear it from the panelists on their thoughts of Datuk Sri Najib's budget, and maybe share their views on Pakatan Harapan's budget as well. First, I would like to have Mr. Fahmi to speak a few words.
Assalamualaikum, salam sejahtera, good evening everyone. First and foremost, thank you to all of you for taking time out this evening to be with us. I presume many of you are maybe not as interested in the Malaysia Cup final, which will see two giants, Kedah and Johor, kind of duking it out, inshallah. So thank you for being here. My name is Fahmi. I'm the Communications Director for Parti Keadilan Rakyat. I'm also the National Vice Youth Chief. And in Pakatan Harapan, I've been involved in several committees, including the Manifesto Committee, as well as some parts of the Presidential Council. I wasn't in Parliament when Najib made his pronouncement that his budget 2018 is the mother of all budgets. It seems that we are wont to use these superlatives, these very grandiose terms like mother of all battles, mother of all genies, mother of all budgets. So I hope the feminists out there are quite happy. But I think to be quite serious and quite honest, I think a lot of people are quite worried. Datuk Sri Anwar from Sungai Buloh actually released a statement questioning, for example, where is Datuk Sri Najib going to increase the revenue base for the government? So we see that there will be a lot of money spent. In fact, this is the biggest budget to date, 280 billion ringgit. And we're also worried that being the biggest budget, how much of it will actually end up in the Rakyat's pocket versus cronies' pockets. So we're quite worried about that. Because based on earlier estimates, approximately 15 to 20%, 15 to 18% or 20% of the budget that's allocated usually ends up being wasted, leaked, and in terms of corruption. So we're quite worried about that. Being such a big budget, how much of it will actually get to people? And really, when you compare it with Pakatan Harapan's budget, Pakatan Harapan's budget was created with so many obstacles, we have lack of resources. We don't have access to the kind of specialists and people in government that the government obviously has. But I think the team did as commendable a job as they could have, given the kind of reality. I think there has been a lot of discussions, there's been a lot of agreements, as well as disagreements. So what you see in the Pakatan Harapan's budget actually is a reflection. What we should, I feel, focus on is the process by which the party leaders, the Pakatan Harapan parties, tried to put together a budget given the lack of resources. I mean, just to give you a sense, Wabi Nuriza is the current MP for Lebah Pantai, and she gets practically zero peruntukan, yeah, from the federal government. Instead, it goes to other people who are unelected in Lebah Pantai to distribute to the people in Lebah Pantai. Likewise, for the opposition, the federal opposition, we have very few resources. We have to share and oftentimes fight to get even the small meeting room that we have to share between the four parties and the various committees that we have. And we have, this is I feel, probably quite a good effort in my opinion, being part of it. Very, very difficult. I have to say that I personally may not, maybe there might be things that could have been better. But we see that there are certain things that I find quite curious in terms of how the federal government responded to the budget that made me think that maybe there were certain things that they did copy from us. So, like for example, I think in this weekend's Edge Financial Weekly, there was an article, there was a write-up about how the Deputy Finance Minister kind of changed his position as to how the federal government was going to compensate the highway concessionaires. And what you saw actually is, in my opinion, if they were not clear about how they were going to pay, then could there be some likelihood that the decision to abolish the 4 tolls, Sungai Rasa, Batu Tiga, the one in Bukit Kayu Hitam, and the one in Johor, was that a last-minute decision as a response to the Pakatan Harapan shadow budget, which was announced 2 days prior to Dr. Sri Najib's budget. And I think this is something that we have to pay attention to, because Pakatan Harapan, for example, of course, some people say that it's a very populist move, to abolish all the tolls, to abolish GST, regardless of the mechanism by which we go about abolishing GST. But I think it resonates with the people on the ground. And I think, at the very least, we get a conversation going. And what's very important is that people understand that if Pakatan Harapan was in government, I think the primary focus that we will pay attention to, the primary thing that we will pay attention to is reforming the institution, because 280 billion ringgit, and we don't see how Dr. Sri Najib is going to reform institutions to cut down on corruption. We don't see that. I mean, I maybe some of you may beg to differ, but if we don't tackle the problem of corruption, I think that's going to be a very big problem for us going forward. We already know how it is with our GLCs. In fact, one of the things that we discovered in the course of putting together the Pakatan Harapan's budget is that a lot of our GLCs, and they are underperforming when you compare with the GLCs, like for example, the Sovereign Wealth Fund in Singapore, Temasek, has an internal rate of return of about 3% compared to, in Malaysia, a lot of our GLCs may have a rate of return of about 0.6%, 0.8%, which is quite, there's a lot of room for improvement. But we don't see that yet. Perhaps because there's not much political will to execute the reforms in order to make sure that the GLCs run more smoothly. Being in Kuala Lumpur, I'm very concerned about the budget for Kuala Lumpur itself. We see the FT Ministry is getting about 1.2 billion ringgit. And DBKL, traditionally, over the last couple of years, they have allocated between upwards of between 2 and 3 billion ringgit. So if you combine the FT Ministry along with DBKL's budget annually, you will see that usually it's more than the budget of Selangor itself. Yet we have zero access, very little access to how DBKL itself makes its budget. MPs have no access to DBKL's budget, the budget document itself, MPs, they don't get them. And we only can rely on whatever has been announced by the mayor when he makes his speech about the budget. We can't get our hands on the budget document itself. And we know that there was, of course, last year, wasn't it, that MECC arrested a very senior DBKL director on allegations of corruption, where this supposedly he had amassed about 30 luxury condominium units. And what are the kind of things that DBKL is doing to make sure that problems like that don't continue? We see very recently the problem that we saw here, very nearby, on the federal highway, where because of the flash flood, and then who was to blame? The Federal Territories Ministry, until today, since 2009, until today, has refused to gazette the Kuala Lumpur City Plan 2020, which is so crucial, so important for the future development of Kuala Lumpur. So I think, for me, as a politician, and as someone who is in Kuala Lumpur, what I would really like to see is that what are the kind of reforms that the federal government is committed to, knowing that we're going to go into elections, and the way it's laid out. I quipped about it on Twitter. Some of for example, they're going to pay 1,500 ringgit to civil servants, 750, I believe, to pensioners, 1,500 ringgit to ketua-ketua kampung and to batin, but 1,000 ringgit first and 500 ringgit later. So I quipped on Twitter that it felt like it was a structured deduct berstruktur, where you make one payment here and then wait until close to elections or after elections and then you make another payment. So anyone who sees this in any other democracy, questions would be raised about the morality, whether this is good, is this not something that should be investigated, or is it open? Openly it's trying to I don't know if the word is entice, but perhaps change people's minds. And I think the best way to change ordinary Malaysians' minds is for the federal government to quickly announce a raft of reforms to make sure that a lot of the systemic problems that we're facing today, corruption, which is endemic, how are we going to resolve? How are we going to solve all of these problems? So I think I'll end my opening remarks there, and maybe later we can continue the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Next, I think we would like to hear Wabi Noriza to say a few words about the Prime Minister's budget and maybe about our Pakatan Harapan budget as well.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much, Charmaine, pengurusi majlis kita pada malam ini. Saudara Fahmi Fazil dan juga saudara Azwa yang saya hormati, tuan rumah, saudara Daniel. I'm reminded of the kabuki performance that I saw as a child. My father brought us there in 1995. Ladies and gentlemen, selamat malam, Assalamualaikum, salam sejahtera dari Wani, Sohor di VIP di Lembah Pantai ini. Saya fikir inilah setting yang paling relaxing. It's one of the best settings I've ever been in. Thank you so much for that. It's such a privilege, actually, such a pleasure to be in these surroundings. I think it's one of the rare pleasures for politicians. And it's always a very hostile, high-strung environment. We always have to watch our pressure, blood pressure, and so on and so forth. But tonight, I felt it's quite important that we're talking about something so crucial, which affects our purse strings, but also our children's future purse strings. Yeah? Because how much you spend today and how much you plan for 2018 will definitely affect how much you have to pay later on. So, ladies and gentlemen, tonight I wanted initially to watch JDT against Kedah. Itulah perancangan asal saya, tapi kerana tiket dikhabarkan telah diberikan kepada kementerian dan agensi tertentu, makanya sebagai salah seorang anggota dan pimpinan Parti Keadilan Rakyat, saya tidak dibenarkan akses untuk mendapatkan tiket tersebut. Just to showcase how Malaysia, many things, not just steel, not just other things, having their own APs, also tickets for the finals. Tapi it is a problem, because it means that the accessibility is severely affected. Imagine if you are die-hard JKT fan, you must be joking. You would probably be depressed. You would be denied the opportunity to watch the finals or wait. JKT might lose or JKT might win. Being a member of parliament from Matampao initially, and of course I was born in Pakatan University. I'm quite neutral on such things. But having said that, thank you for according us your time. I think one of the key issues I'd like to address tonight, because we probably would hear more from Azwa, is the fact that now this budget, I think for many Malaysians affecting some populist handouts, is crucial, it's important because it addresses certain segments. It addresses those who are between the 20,000 ringgit to 70,000 ringgit income bracket. They will probably enjoy a 2% reduction. And this means the GST is going to be an instrument for taxation that's going to be here to stay. So my prediction, even though I'm not an economist, is by the time the GE14 is ended, you will definitely enjoy 8% in terms of the GST target. And it will rise up from the current 6%. And I think this is quite important because how else would the government take more money? 251,000 people would not be paying taxes anymore, thanks to the reduction. So these are key determinants. Bila masa, saya bagi tak kabar Rahim, bila masa mereka kurangkan 2% untuk rakyat yang mendapat gaji RM20,000 hingga RM70,000 ke tahun, ini mendapat pengurangan 2% dari segi cukai pendapatan. Dan bermaksud tentu akan beralih kepada pungutan cukai GST yang akan naik daripada 6% hingga 8% selepas pilihan raya umum ke-14. Because there has to be a way to, as a government, to get more revenue. Now, because of that, I think one of the key issues facing us is, of course, our mounting debt. Yes, it's a problem. There's a slew of huge, big ticket projects. I think people are quite excited. Ooh, MRT, yay! People of Kuala Lumpur are cheering. I went on MRT. I think it's important. I'm very proud of the project, but I think issues with regards to costing and how you finance it and how you maintain it for the next 10, 20 years will definitely have to be grappled with. One. Secondly, the project in terms of the high-speed rail from Singapore to Kuala Lumpur, and of course you also have the ECRL project. So these are huge projects. Okay, it's going to cost us billions of ringgit, and I would really like to borrow a phrase from P. Kudasegaran here to state that we really need to factor in how much it will cost in terms of financing all these key projects and how much of positivity or benefits will it affect residents and Malaysians, not just in the key areas, and how in turn it will spur economic activity. So anything you do in terms of planning, you must make sure you're not just budgeting for the current future, as in when you're Prime Minister, but also when you retire from being Prime Minister. And we do hope to God that it's not going to be another 22 years before Prime Minister Najib retires. It's going to be a long, long time. Then, so the issue I would like to really raise here in terms of the mismatching that's taking place. Now, a lot of people have talked about the ballooning debt, etc., etc. Of course, Pakatan Harapan has come up with our alternative plans, and I always reiterate, at the end of the day, we can give guidance on key principles, but we do have the economic planning unit. We do have, at one time, the Majlis Tindakan Ekonomi, the Economic Action Committee that came out with the new economic agenda, the reform pledges, which was shelved when Perkasa met the Prime Minister. So at the end of the day, do not underestimate the strength and might of the civil service, especially in the economic planning unit, when politicians stop meddling. And then that's what we need. We really need to ensure there's some degree of professionalism in terms of dispensing with policies and implementing some plans. So my biggest concern is for the youth. Because the youth of Malaysia is going to be faced with a future that's going to leave them bereft of a job. You're talking about 500,000 youth. 200,000 plus will be graduates who are unemployed. Dan siapa sahaja yang mempunyai masa mahu membaca laporan ekonomi 2017-2018 akan tahu kelemahan kita apa. We do not have as yet a very clear-cut and efficient monitoring system to know what employers are in need of and how many are being supplied into the job market. They admit this in the economic report 2017-2018. So, I mean, we hear numbers being bandied about, but I think this is important because you need to have a clear look. You have to have your eyes wide open in terms of how the younger generation will have a more profitable future, sustainable future by having jobs that meet their requirements or their necessary qualifications. So 500,000 people, young people, are out of jobs. This would translate to 10.5% unemployment rate compared to the current full employment of the general public. There's a big problem. And I'll tell you why it's another big problem. The government is planning for 1.5 million young diploma holders of TVET to enter the job market by 2020. This means they form about 60%. The problem is, over the past 13 years, if you take the year 2000 to 2013, there have been as high as 152% increase of foreign workers with mid-skill set. Dipanggil dalam bahasa Melayu itu, peningkatan 152% diambil pekerja separuh mahir daripada golongan pekerja asing. So the growth has been astronomical. And this leaves different companies, and I don't really blame them, I blame policymakers, right? Because if you are a company, you can hire foreign workers at a low rate. They can probably stay at one particular place, they can probably bathe at one particular tongkang that you probably provide at a nearby construction site. Who wants to take a look? Just go through, Lebah Pantai, there's a few development sites, and you can see them bathing together.
Estate.
Yeah, together. And of course, this means you don't have to worry about hygiene, you don't have to worry about many things. I mean, because they are sort of in the unseen sector, right? You only see where the buildings are built. You don't have to see the suffering that they go through. And then it means that employers don't have the incentive to sort of go up the technological ladder. So this also has been seen through the sheer number of foreign workers, 6.7 million as of last year. So I think 6.7 million out of a 40 million workforce is 40 million now? Yeah, it's huge. Of course, not all are illegal, but most are illegal. So having most illegal workers means that there is no sort of effective system. We have to either absorb them, we have to either send them back, and this is the underlying reason why you can't send them back. Fahmi mentioned earlier, corruption. The government will introduce a new measuring system that will cover all the different 7 ministries. We talk about TVET, diploma level holders, they are all managed by 7 different ministries. So now they're going to be under the umbrella of the Home Minister and Home Ministry. And I can't say much because I'm not protected, like when I'm in Parliament. But I can just name you a few companies who are dealing with the contracting of foreign workers into the country. And if they're tied to a particular ministry, say Ministry K, yeah? If they're tied to that ministry, and the ministry, this Ministry K that we talk about, is also the same ministry. They're supposed to make sure that foreign workers are reduced by the year 2020. If they are getting money from each foreign worker coming into the country, would they then have the incentive to reduce the number of foreign workers in the country? I have no idea what you're talking about. I mean, just, what are you talking about? I'm just talking about a story here. Please. But this is a real problem. It's not just a structural mismatch that we see in front of us, lack of, sort of quantifiable data, but also for a country of 34 million people now, 32. I mean, it's not such story, right? It's just very simple to manage. I know we're not as small as Singapore, but we can certainly be more efficient. But my point is, you have to correct this conflict of interest. Then you can start by making sure some of the plans, which are quite well thought of, can be implemented sufficiently. So my biggest concern is not necessarily today. I'm worried about our youth. I'm worried about graduates in the country. Because, like it or not, you have 51% demand of graduates coming out from the particular system, but only 21% opportunities provided for in the labour force. The rest are lower skilled and middle skilled. So I want to ask you, if we had the time to subject Pemandu and Government Transformation Program officers, they should be answerable because we paid them to help make our system and economy much more efficient. Where is Idris Jala when we need to hear the tunes being played? Sweet songs to improve the state of the economy and our feelings and our sentiments. But it's really crucial to bring back because I feel that from there you can monitor how things are and you can start to find solutions that could make the future much better and more easily. The other bit, of course, I wanted to repeat whatever Professor Jomo Kwame Sudaram has highlighted. I think it's quite crucial, which people don't really talk about, is the issue of again policy making and the different industries that we choose to be involved with. He talks about premature deindustrialization a lot. And if anyone remembers Pak La, he used to be our Prime Minister, that was Tun Abdullah Badawi. I remember at the time we faced a clear problem of food shortage, rice especially. We had to, food security was a big sexy issue, everyone kept talking about it, and people kept being upset because we were importing from Thailand and Vietnam in terms of rice, and we're supposed to be a rice producing state. And food security was actually one of the key hallmarks of the Badawi era. We were supposed to be having this agricultural, sustainability targets. We're supposed to be food sufficient and secure, but that was not translated in the years after. So having a 5-year plan under RMK 11 or RMK 10 means that we have to have some degree of consistency in choosing different industries. So my concern is Najib has chosen the 4th Industrial Revolution as his sexiest buzzword. There are so many buzzwords in Parliament. There's even a competition amongst members of Parliament. Who can memorize the most numbers of buzzwords? Before it was the ETP, GTP, it's all very cool. But now it's the Industrial Revolution, and the 4th Industrial Revolution that has been introduced by the Prime Minister. So again, I think from our particular position, it's really important to enact clear-cut reforms on this particular issue and having a clear look at the data. If we start having a very accountable degree of disclosure in terms of what's actually happening out there, we even have to open up our eyes in terms of the actual workers out there, because the foreign workers and their existence actually depresses. We're basically enjoying a lot of the numbers, the projections, the high income economy from the back of basically oppressed foreign workers, I would say, in some parts. But it's not just them, because at the end of the day, the suppression also suppresses wages amongst Malaysians. So moving forward, in this particular budget, we talk about many things. People, of course, want to hear about populist measures. Because it's nice to hear you get bonuses and so on and so forth. And I think for civil servants, their bigger issue is you're only getting 1,500 ringgit, which is not even a month's bonus, or 2 months bonus, or 3 months bonus. So that's our challenge, right? Because spending prudently, I think, people still want to hear some goodies. If you look at the Selangor and Penang budget, that's also what people are looking at. There's a term and danger that's lurking from developments of democracies worldwide, and they keep calling it the populist kleptocracies. Because you can be a kleptocrat, you can be corrupt, but as long as you make the citizens relatively happy, you give them breadcrumbs at the right time, you're going to be voted in the next elections. So that's, I think, the reality that we're grappling with. But I feel, amongst all of you, it's really important to understand the structural mismatching, the sort of serious systemic problems that we will be inheriting, regardless who the government is, because this restricts the possible alternative government's future and policy making much more. What more can you do if you have that kind of amount of revenues? Now, of course, you're stuck with GST at 200. 80 billion ringgit is going to be spent, and the developmental expenditure keeps shrinking. So if you have 100 ringgit, I think Dr. Muhammad Abdul Khalid keeps talking about this, 100 ringgit, only 16 ringgit is being spent for that development. So I think that part is quite covered. You know enough in terms of how much we're spending for operating expenditure, etc. But my bigger issue is the mismatching and what's going to be affecting, what's going to help our young people. So in terms of a solution, even from the opposition Pakatan Harapan, keadilan side, we don't believe. If you look at Germany's economy, you don't need everyone to be graduates, but you have to have a foolproof, of caliber, diploma, technical and vocational educational institution program. So people feel proud in terms of having that level of skills that can help them generate income, yet also provide work, provide some pride in their work. So that's fine, but the issue is, how do we make sure this 1.5 million workers that we create will not be competing with the foreign workers that's already out there in the market? And if they're there in the market, second generation, third generation, 10 years, 20 years in Malaysia, where it's going to exert more burden on our healthcare system, exert more burden, of course, on other social systems. They're not allowed to be part of our educational system. So what does it mean? That means they have to continue partaking because they have to survive, right? And people have to live. They have to be part of the informal sector for the longest time. So I feel it's going to be a time bomb that if we don't tackle soon. I think this is one of the biggest issues with regards to demographies, because Singapore guards demography like a hawk. They're very clear cut. They know how to predict. They know who to target. Who's the the people they're going to sort of groom up to the next level. How about us? Who are we going to groom? What kind of Malaysia would you see in the next 5 years? You already see a different Malaysia. Am I right? If you go to KLCC on Hari Raya, and this is the reality. I mean, we have to understand they're going to be part of our society. How do you protect your children or your neighbors because they're going to be together? So in terms of solution, it has to be an out-of-box solution, not the usual Trump-style solution. Because how do you build walls? I mean, I think it's quite unfeasible, and it really requires us to start thinking how we can generate some degree of change in terms of our, structural mismatches and how we look at the economy and what can be done, not just by the budget, but in terms of our planning for the next 10, 15 years. So I hope to hear some suggestions as well after we finish. Thank you so much for according me your time, and I hope that you come to Parliament whenever you want to. If you submit us your names earlier on, you can see us, fighting. Sometimes we can give suggestions that are never taken up, but please, you can submit your names, and JJ is there, if he can take your name. And yes, and we can make sure you can sit, and your names can also be announced. We have people who came to the Not Not Cafe, owned by Daniel, when we have our time and turn to speak in Parliament. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eliza. The issue on youth unemployment and youth issues really, I can relate a lot with it. Because recently I just heard from this one friend of mine, and he's in his mid-30s, and he told me, hey Charmaine, I need to start planning for my retirement. Then I was like, what do you mean start planning for your retirement? You're still young, you can still work and all that. I thought he was going to plan for his holidays and all that vacations post-retirement at mid-30s. But he said no. He said, no, I need to start planning for my retirement. I need to save up. At mid-30s, he's telling me that he needs to save up because he worries for his own future. And he does not even have a family. He has his parents, of course, but not a wife or a kid. But he's generally worried of he himself, post-retirement, how is he going to survive? I think these kind of things really, it will hit every one of us in time to come. So let's hear from our third panelist, Mr. Azrul Azwa, the economist, on the current budget, the highlights and the drawbacks of it, and whether, because GST is currently a major problem for the lower income group and the middle income group. So we would like to hear from him also whether what do you think about GST, whether it's good for the people or it's good for just a few people. Oops, let's hear from him.
It's an efficient instrument of, yeah, yes, yes.
Anyway, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh dan selamat malam.
Malam.
Okay. We say good evening in English.
Yeah, well, good night is better.
Anyway, thank you, Lebah Pantai. This was organized by Lebah Pantai, right?
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you, Lebah Pantai, for inviting me. Just like last year. So this is second year in a row that I've been doing this for
Thank
Lebah
you.
Pantai.
Can also be third year in a row if you want. Yeah.
Okay, anyway, I will review some of the points that Wabino Rizal just said just now. We know that the split between OPEX and development expenditure, or OPEX, operating expenditure, and development expenditure, call it DEVEX. And we have seen, in fact, we have seen since 2012 how the split has been too much in favor of OPEX, and it has been above 80% out of total expenditure. More than 80% goes to OPEX since 2012. If I recall correctly, that split between OPEX and DEVEX, that was roughly between 65 and 85 during 1999 and 2003, but now it has gone up to 80, around 80-20 or close to 90-10 in fact. Okay, and if you look at the ratio of OPEX to revenue, that means you take the amount of OPEX and you divide by the amount of revenue. For example, you take for next year, what is projected for next year, it will be it will be 97.7% in 2018. That means for every 1 ringgit or 100 ringgit, for that matter, for every 100 ringgit that you use to spend on operating expenditure, only I think if I calculate correctly, only 2.3% will be used for development expenditure, and that's not enough. So the government, in order to cover development expenditure, the government will have to borrow. So that's why we have seen ballooning public debt for the longest time, and more so since the fourth quarter of 2012, when the public debt amount crossed the $500 billion mark. Since then and now, we don't have the projection for next year. What we have is only until the end of the second quarter of this year, and that is not that far from 700 billion. Okay. Rabbi Riza mentioned just now about the fourth industrial revolution, or IR 4.0. I like that. And I think, well, actually, if I'm not mistaken, that was announced at one of the World Economic Forum meetings. I think that was in 2016, and it was revealed then. And I think we should make more efforts. We should introduce more initiatives and programs in order to leverage on IR 4.0. And to me, I think it's a good thing, IR 4.0. Anyway, just to give you an idea of the economy in general. Okay, During the first half of this year, the economy expanded by 5.7%, and for next year, the projection is for between 5.2 to 5.7%. This year between 5.2 to 5.7, and next year between 5 and 5.5%. Okay, the outlook over the next 12 to 18 months will depend a lot on, number one, the resilience of domestic demand, notably consumer spending and private investment. Number two, on the further upside potential for commodity prices, especially average prices of crude oil. And next year, if I'm not mistaken, according to the economic report 2017-2018, the forecast is $52 per barrel, as compared to $50 per barrel this year. And also CPO next year, 2,750 ringgit per ton, and this year 2,700 ringgit per ton. The third thing to look at is at our ability to weather external headwinds, especially rising protectionism worldwide. We have seen that with the orange cloud. Policy uncertainties in advanced economies, especially in the US and in the UK. Persistent slowdown in China, which is the world's second largest economy, due to its structural imbalances. Among the structural imbalances are because of the debt fuel growth model in China, and that's not sustainable. It's a troubled financial system, which is plagued by non-performing loans and shadow banking risk. A large but closed capital market with limited ability to channel liquidity efficiently, and its population, which is aging rapidly, and also another thing is geopolitical tensions in many spots around the world, especially in the Middle East, Africa, and even Asia. Effects of climate change, high financial market volatility, which could trigger another global financial crisis, among others. And the fourth one is the potential for Malaysia to achieve as much as possible a broad-based sectoral growth, or at least solid positive growth for the majority of sectors or industries, to offset a slump in others such as oil and gas, clothing and footwear, among others. Okay, if you read carefully the entire budget speech and also the economic report 2017-2018, we should be able to see that Malaysia's medium to long-term economic ambitions include to become a high-income advanced economy by 2020. That one we know for the longest time. Number two, to become a 2 trillion economy, and also to register total trade value worth 2 trillion ringgit by 2025, to benefit from and secure competitive advantages of the IR 4.0. Last but not least, to join the ranks of the world's top 20 nations by 2050, which is under the TN50. Okay. Although the projections that I mentioned just now for this year and next, between 5.2 and 5.7 for this year, and 5 and 5.5 for next year, I would say rather realistic and highly commendable given a multitude of downside risks. I think, but these ranges that I mentioned just now are still far from exceeding the minimum 6% GDP growth target under the ETP. And this 6% holy grail is touted, has been touted as the prerequisite to become a high income developed nation. And I don't see when are we going to achieve that? Okay, and besides that, what's the point of having strong and robust economic growth if people on the ground don't enjoy the benefits, or worse, don't even feel that the economy is moving? And what is the point of this strong growth if salaries and wages remain stagnant, inadequate to catch up, let alone match rising cost of living due to the WME impacts of GST and subsidy rationalization program? And because of that, many are forced to resort to borrowings to survive, and in the process, they have to increase household debt. And what is the point of having strong growth if Malaysia remains a high-cost economy, especially for the low-income group and for the underprivileged? And what is the point of having strong growth if that doesn't translate into equal opportunities for all in terms of socio-economic mobility? And that could lead to widening socio-economic inequalities in income, wealth, and debt distribution. And if you look at one of the World Bank's criteria, and this one that outlines that to qualify into the league of a high-income nation, the gross national income per capita must be at least $12,235 according to its latest updates as at 1st July this year. And this is the income threshold for any country to qualify as a high-income nation. The latest is 12,235. 2-3 years ago, that was at about 12,700 plus $. So it has come down a bit, but they update this every year in July. Okay, and this means Malaysia's per capita income must reach about 48,940 ringgit by 2020, assuming a better exchange rate of 4 ringgit per $. Okay, and as at close yesterday, it was at 4.23, I think, and the 52-week range of the range of the past 52 weeks, it is between 4.1775 and 4.5002. So, with that basis, and with income per capita projected to hit 40,777 ringgit next year, and based on the 20-year average growth between 1999 and 2018 of 6.6%, Malaysia could fall short slightly to hit only 48,665 ringgit by 2020. But we have two caveats. Ringgit may not strengthen to 4 ringgit to USD by 2020, looking at the current trend. And the other caveat is the World Bank's income threshold may decrease or even increase compared to the latest level by 2020. Okay, thank you.
Wow, our future looks really bleak, isn't it? Especially what our ringgit will continue to there's no chance of seeing it strengthening in the next few years, at least until 2020. Alright, moving on. I have a question for Wabinu Iza. A few years back, in 2010, the Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, did a famous idea that we heard that is that it's projected that a future for the youth by 2030, Malaysian youth will be young, and Malaysians generally will be young and poor. Is this saying still applicable or resolved, or has it turned from bad to worse? You know, how would you view it differently if Pakatan comes into power?
Well, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch published a report a couple of years ago, and they compared Malaysia's development and sort of progress since the late 80s, where we were at par with South Korea. So at the time, of course, they project by 2030, we are still relatively a young nation, but we will be relatively a poor nation. But I think right now, the other problem that we have to be taking into account in terms of the future is the elderly that has come to the fore. That means how many more people will form part of the aging population, and how does that factor in terms of our ability to ensure that they have a life that's full of better quality once they retire. And this is a big problem. And it's not so much about whether we can change this. We have to start thinking about designing a better future to meet certain objectives. So I don't like to always assume only when Pakatan comes to power. It takes an entire village, an entire nation to believe that we have so much potential that we can actually unleash. And that begins with not only caring and having a genuine future for our young, which I mentioned earlier, because they will form the main bulwark about in terms of savings, in terms of how much the economy is going to be spurred to maintain and protect the old. So I mean, I can just give you an example. Like in University of Malaya, there are 12 geriatric specialists who specialize in the care of the elderly to manage the needs of the whole nation. So even on that basis, I mean, we have to start planning. If you're a policymaker, you would think one of the key things I want to prioritize is care for the elderly, right? Having people to basically live in public housing that will ensure they don't fall and break their hip. I mean, these are basic things that have to be factored in terms of development and planning. And the second bit, of course, is for young people. I think Wawa mentioned a very important issue, which is in terms of wage growth. Well, we're all on nickname basis here. I mean, Jibi, Wawa. And I think the issue, because you can't expect half of our population, 50% of the working force actually, have a wage that is below 2,000 ringgit. The median is about 1,700 ringgit. I mean, it's really pittance if you talk about growth. And for the bottom 40, over the past year, they've seen a wage growth of 17 ringgit. And I think it's certainly going to sort of exert further pressure. So moving forward, I would say we should be mindful of different developments, whether it's the World Economic Forum's Industrial Revolution, but let's not just focus on the height. You always have, McKinsey, they always look at the 100 feet sort of future, right? But from there, can we scale it down so you know what are the steps that you need to take to get there? And all these nitty-gritty bits about how many foreign workers you have, how many sectors are in need of assistance, and so on and so forth, will help you get to that future. So even if I said, at the time I mentioned Bank of America's Merrill Lynch's projection, I am always optimistic. I think that's how we have to be. Yeah, of course, there are challenges externally as well as domestically, but we have to understand and believe in the resilience of Malaysians. Whether lower income, mid-income, higher income, that helps spur a particular movement in order to remind others. It also takes all of you and your efforts to enact this future that we want. So I would say from now on until forever, I will always prioritize the issue of education. I cannot say enough about this issue. I think at the end of the day, more than anything else, if you prioritize the level and the quality of the education in schools, you will address many problems. People gain social mobility through a good education. You can't control who your parents are. Some are richer, some are poorer, but you can certainly ensure you get better education from schools at primary level. People ask me, for example, in terms of the command of English. I was very thankful because I had a brilliant English teacher who forced me to read Gone with the Wind with a dictionary. Frankly, Scarlet, but I think it really changes. It always starts at the classroom level, right? And from there, you can be rest assured. Are they going to be old? Are they going to be young? Are they 30? I don't really care because I know they're going to be smart enough. They're going to be able to articulate a certain particular position and build a certain future that meets our needs. So never take it for granted. So I get very angry when we politicize education because it's not it's not about being UMNOs or Keadilan. I mean, schools are schools. Schools are something that's sacred, and it has to be protected from primary level, preschool level. We're talking about Permata here. And I already refrain from attacking the issue of Permata. The only thing I attack is the fact that it has to be leveled. Because it's not just about having 10% of the population having this, kids are, genius movement. It has to be across, and ensuring some degree of openness up to the tertiary level. And singing UMNO songs in schools are just not the way to cut it in terms of building the future that we want. So I would say that's a big issue. And parents here, young people here who plan to have children, please. I mean, you have no idea the power that you wield. Don't just think that whatever is up to the head of the PIBG. Politics begin at the PTA. I mean, I can name you the wives of ministers and ministers who are the head of main PTAs in schools, including my children's school. It's hell, right? Because it's like not enough you have them in your face in politics, they're also in your face in school. And that has to change. Because we don't need politicians to run schools, we actually need people with vision. So I would say the future is very rosy for as long as we believe and do our bit to address the needs of the younger population, the graduates, even those who did not have the opportunity to study up to the tertiary level. Everyone has skills. Everyone deserves a second chance in terms of employment and educational opportunities. And of course, the elderly. So that's what we plan to do, and I hope that you can be part of this because we certainly cannot do it alone. And Azwa is an economist, but what can economists do if they don't have people who can initiate the vision? So that's for me. 5:30, Bank of America on GST. Sure.
Okay. In the budget speech and also in the economic report 2017-2018, we could see there are about 7 or 8 updates regarding GST as part of the efforts to streamline the GST treatment. I don't need to reread all that because I think everyone of you has gone through that. Okay, my comments. Okay, while we move, while the move to zero rate the GST for all reading materials, to exempt the GST for services provided by local authorities, and to fully exempt the GST on construction works of schools and places of worship funded by donations is highly commendable. I think the GST relief for cruise operators on handling services provided by port operators in Asia and imports on big ticket items such as aircraft and ships is weird and mind-boggling.
Oh yeah.
Why? Because clearly, who will benefit? Clearly, I think the high-income group and large corporations will benefit. Not us, not the many, the few. Hence our theme tonight. Right? I'm trying to bring us back to our theme. Okay. Okay. And secondly, although nobody can deny that GST is a regressive tax, it is also undeniable that GST has proven to be an effective and efficient tax collection. And I'm talking from the perspective of the federal government, of course, not from the perspective of consumers. Thanks to its intrinsic safeguards in addressing tax evasion risks, and also GST could also counter hidden and overlapping costs that could potentially burden consumers. Okay? And we all know that all parties have spent a lot of efforts, time, and money
5 million lah,
to implement the GST.
Yeah.
And since GST is already in place for almost 3 years, okay, I think abolishing GST would put to waste the enormous amount of efforts, time, and money that we have spent. That's my view. Although I know not many here will support me, but let's be practical, right? Okay, and to prevent such a huge waste, although I must reiterate that I'm not a pro GST, I'm not, but I just want to be practical, okay? And I think GST could be tweaked to make it more progressive in nature. I mentioned just now, GST is regressive in nature, but we can tweak it to make it more progressive, okay? For example, by introducing a 3-tiered system together with zero rated and exempted supplies, of course. Okay, tier number 1, we lower GST rate than 6% for basic necessities, for example 3%. Tier number 2, we maintain the standard GST rate of 6% for non-essential but non-luxury items. And tier number 3, we push the GST rate higher than 6%, but for luxury items. Okay, for example, at 9 or even 12 or even 18%. For example, Birkins for you know who. We should impose 18% GST. For example.
Hey teacher.
Okay lah, 25 lah. Okay. For example, again, that is for the many, not the few, right? So we can make it progressive. Okay, and at the same time, we may select one or all of the most popular progressive taxation mechanism. For example, capital gains tax. Although I'm not sure whether many will be willing to accept that. Higher top marginal income tax rate for the super rich. Okay, let's say, if I'm mistaken now, the higher marginal top marginal income tax rate is 25%, right? Okay, so that means Fahmi, for example, he earns 1 million ringgit a year, for example. Okay,
To make it more believable.
okay, and let's say Wabi Nuriza earns 200,000 ringgit a year, and it doesn't make sense for both of them to pay the same tax rate, while the difference between the income is huge, right? So there should be a different one for the super rich. For example, we can tax Fahmi 35%, for example. Not I don't propose that we increase it up to 70% like in France, but if we increase it to 30 or 35%, why not, right? So it will be a fairer sharing of the burden of adjustments, and it should be borne more by the rich and not by the poor. Again, for the many, not for the few, right? And I think the biggest bone of contention among the majority of nations is not the GST per se, I think, but the impact of its implementation on the cost of living. I would put the blame on the quasi-simultaneous implementation of 2 major fiscal policies, which huge repercussions on prices in general, namely, number 1, the subsidy rationalization program, or SRP, and number 2, GST. Because, although SRP has been ongoing since 2010, right? But its damaging effects on inflation are still felt until today. And by 1st April 2015, the government introduced GST, and because of that, we are seeing ravaging impacts on the cost of living. Okay. How I wish the government would have let the SRP to run its full course until its adverse effects on the cost of living are fully or almost neutralized before introducing GST. But of course, it is a wishful thinking. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Seeing that, wow, I'm just at a loss for words. A question for Fahmi. Okay, I understand that Fahmi champions a lot on local government issues and even youth issues as well. Could you please share with us on the current situation of job security as well as home security, especially for the youth, you know?
Yeah, we just had a program this evening before coming here with some young people who stay quite nearby. They live in Lebah Pantai. They live in quite close to where we are. And I asked just generally, okay, how many of you, what kind of jobs do you guys do? So dispatch, like a lorry driver, and these are people who are staying in like practically the heart of Kuala Lumpur. And just ask them frankly, okay, where do you see yourself staying? You know, okay, do you think you can stay in Kuala Lumpur when you get older and then you get married and you have kids? No. How can you afford? The reality is that we have several ticking time bombs, one of which is housing. I think you're going to see in Kuala Lumpur, which if development is not checked properly, and we have no sustainable plan, you're going to see a lot of young, poorer Malaysians probably having to stay much further away than the city centre, which then drives out the kind of creativity, the kind of social life that you see in Kuala Lumpur. That is going to be a major problem. And the one thing that we all want to know is that, okay, so if Pakatan Harapan were to come into government, were to come into power, how would that change the future, the fate of young people in terms of, what about jobs? So that's why I think there's some disagreement with regards to the implementation of minimum wage. And I think some people feel that maybe it's impractical, maybe it's too costly, but I think it is something which we have to, as a society, start to have some serious discussions about. How many Malaysians, like we have so many people who are in the B40 category, and many of whom, imagine if Malaysia is becoming increasingly urbanized, at 70%, urbanized with now. Yeah, 75%. So more and more young people who are possibly coming from poorer families are staying in towns, in cities, and you're going to see that they have fewer and fewer options in terms of what kind of work they can do because of the education system that they came out of, and also what are the kind of homes that they may or may not be able to afford. And this is going to be a very big problem. Just 5 minutes away from where we are, there are housing areas, public housing projects that have a lot of chronic social problems, chronic economic problems. Whenever Nuriza, myself and the team, whenever we go down and visit these homes, sometimes there's nothing in the house except linoleum and maybe like a sofa. That's it. This is, and there's a case where the father, he's a single father, the wife passed away, 5 children, none of whom have been going to school for the last half a year, because he has no job. This is Kuala Lumpur, right? This is the reality. You're not even talking about young people, you're talking about, older people, right? So I don't know whether government policy currently as it's executed has the kind of safety net, or whether there's a lot of, there's too much gap. I think that there's still a lot of Malaysians who are left behind, either by omission or by tacit commission. It's like sengaja ataupun tak, people are left behind. And I mentioned that there are 2 ticking time bombs. One is of course in terms of housing. The second one is in terms of healthcare. I think a lot of Malaysians, if you're staying in Kuala Lumpur, the moment suddenly something happens to you, I mean there was a report, right, that said that there are many Malaysians who will find it very, very difficult to raise 1,000 ringgit in an emergency. And the more that we have to dip into our savings, the more, whenever a medical emergency occurs, a lot of especially urban families, you go to PPUM and you have to go for an emergency surgery. It's expensive. And we know, Nuriza and I know, because we get a lot of requests for assistance. So you can see that the future in that sense looks bleak if you are if you're of the many, not of the few. Because we don't have the kind of income to support, buying airplanes or buying Birkin bags. Sometimes it's just difficult to make ends meet. So I think maybe it's something that we can ask, the crowd, the audience that's here. Maybe maybe it's a good time to kind of turn it around and get some feedback from you all. I mean, you've heard from us. Yeah, you heard we have an economist, an MP, and a guy. But how do you guys feel about Budget 2018? And I know some of you are economists in there, but some of you are people in politics. But just, how do you guys feel? Maybe I'll just turn off the mic and we can kind of have a more free-flow conversation for a while. Is that okay? Okay.
Yeah, questions are now open to the floor. Yeah, any questions?
Well, I know that the budget 2018 is going to be a fairy tale, really. It's not just a fairy tale, it's really a burden to the country. My question is also, the alternative budget from Pakatan Harapan is also like a fairy tale as well. It looks so good to be true that abolishing GST with free education and also PPTN loan being paid upon reaching 4,000 income. All right, where do you find the money to fund the development of the country? That's a reality to me, and I see that as also another budget. The alternative budget is also too good to be true to me. Can the panelists comment on that?
Thank you. I think it's very important also for us when we are dealing with the budget. One of the key things I wished we had more time for was to get the inclusion of thoughts and opinions from not just economists, but generally different stakeholders. If you look at when the government introduced the Majlis Pendidikan Ekonomi Negara, so they had a lot of series of basically sessions with different, some other like employers, different segments in the business sector. So you get a nuanced view. I remember when the government introduced the levy to be paid by the employer instead of the current practice by the workers, all hell broke loose because they did it in a very last-minute manner. So engagement is really important, and I think we didn't really have time for that. We really had to rush it off based on certain deadlines. One. Second, one of the key credible thrusts of the alternative budget is the corruption segment in terms of how much is lost through corruption. So we actually, Wong Chen looked at the projection from the Auditor General's report. So of course the ballpark figure was 20 billion. The people can also add on how much can be salvaged from the 1MDB asset recovery exercise. But having said that, I would say the outlook is more of relying on debt still in the alternative budget. There's no way we can finance everything that we pledged, so it would have to be a deficit-led budget for the first couple of years, being realistically speaking, because even amongst the ministries, you can't immediately cut off the existing operational expenditure in the first year. So it has to be a transition phase, but I always like to look at what Bernie Sanders managed to do in the Democratic campaign. Hillary's or any, how to say, respectable Democrat candidate will never consider giving partly free education, meaning a particular target for students who graduated, and basically forgiving the debt at the time. But when Bernie came up with it, it was eventually taken up by Hillary. So again, it's about really going the distance, changing mindsets. I think that's what a budget should be also doing. And of course, creating discourse. And the more people participate and give feedback, such as what you've done, I think the more fruitful an outcome of an alternative that we can devise. So, we've been quite criticized quite severely. I think it's a healthy thing. I think it's a good thing. I think for so long in our government, in our system, in parliament, we don't talk about the nasty numbers. We don't talk about the nasty outcomes. And it's a healthy process. So if in the American campaign, the Democratic convention and the actual adoption of certain policies that was championed by Hillary, when it included free education and a particular target group for students, I think we can certainly do that because we want to prioritize education. And this would mean not allowing all 620 institutions to operate with no regard of quality and so on and so forth. So there's certain measures that we have to be very, very strict about. The ministries that we have right now, if you save a lot from the current expenditure, if you focus on the key ministries that you need to work, I think the bigger problem, even 20 billion ringgit, 20 billion that we aim to save. So, again, I feel you have to have a clear-cut strategy. When Dr. Sri Anwar Ibrahim came about with the 4,000 ringgit per family, per household, as a target of an income that would be livable, would be comfortable for many electorates. We were screamed at. They said that we were really thinking, we were really not being realistic. So what happened? What happened next was the BRIM was introduced, Bantuan Rakyat Wang Malaysia. And when BRIM was introduced, cash handouts was given to every person with an income level of 4,000 ringgit below. So finally, the government actually made a target of a particular income level that was deemed to be livable. And of course, those below that are deserving of BRIM. A lot of economies, much more developed, much more higher income, have agreed on universal basic income policies. I'm not saying that that's where we're going, but certainly there's many things that are really being considered, which I think beckons the alternative budget a second look. You want to add on?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. And the whole question of is it realistic? Is it a fairy tale? I think for a long time we used to question the ability of the federal opposition to come up with a budget that is not only people friendly but I think aspirational. We've seen whether it's state reserves or just in terms of the kind of benefits that are made available to the targeted groups has grown. I mean, you look at what Selangor, for example, announced. Right? Those of us in Kuala Lumpur, if you're going to all the public housing projects and you speak to people, they're like, hey, how come Selangor can get all these things? Like, we're in KL, we're just like 5 minutes away, how come we can't get? And people are making that kind of comparison because, like, for example, if you're anak Selangor, if you're IC10, about 60, you're eligible to enroll in the scheme Mesra Usimas, which if anything were to happen to you, you get 2,500 ringgit. You don't have to pay anything, you just have to register. Whereas in KL, and I think even these simple comparisons, I think ordinary people see it.
They adopted that policy.
Yeah, they are. They have to copy. Yeah, but then in KL, for example, you have to register, and then if you don't register, you don't renew your registration, then you lose your right. So I had one case where this uncle, his father registered 1 year, but then he passed away the following year, and that was the year he didn't pay the 5 ringgit renewal, and he couldn't get the kaya kematian. So I think if you look at like Selangor and Penang have not gone bust. So I think at the very least, I imagine that if Pakatan Harapan were to take over Putrajaya, at least we have people who have experience in terms of working with the government. Yeah. And actually one more thing that I had in mind, but now because of Wabin Riza's laughter, I kind of forgot. But maybe it'll come back to me. Yeah. But maybe we can take more questions.
Yes.
If I may.
Oh, okay.
If I just want to comment. The reality is that for every youth to go into the job market, it's about 2,000 entry of salary, all right, or 2005. That's the reality. And if Pakatan Harapan were to insist that when the youth reach only 4,000 income, then only they pay the PTDM, it is going to be a tough thing. Because let's face reality, increment is less than 5% for every multinational, for every what they call SMBs and so forth. So how long would it take to reach $4,000 income? And how much money will the students owe? And it is about the social responsibility and accountability of the students to pay the loan.
Well, already the PTPTN is seeing such a huge portion of debtors not paying. We're talking about it's unsustainable. There has to be a way. The government's even looking into revamping it. So you're talking about an unsustainable program. So I think it's a matter of time. Having to revamp that particular program and restructuring it really allows us, because people are just not paying. The ones that are paying are actually coming from very good families. They are supported by the parents. So a study has been done. I think that hovers around more than 70%. So like it or not, it would probably be having to change. And if you look at the US, they've introduced the debt forgiveness act, the student loan forgiveness act even. Because when you talk about a particular unsustainable scheme, then we are talking about the future post PTPTN that can't be sustained. Oh, sorry, I said it.
Well, I believe that the system allows the government to know who are those people who can afford to pay. So it is not about the amount of payment; it's about the system of what they call punishing those who do not pay their PPTN.
But who can afford it?
Especially those who can afford, who can afford it and is not paying, and is not taking the responsibility and accountability to pay. It is not about paying; it's about really the system of punishment, the system, the punitive measures, and so forth. That is, I'm talking from a very hard point of view because I've seen a lot of people who are not paying PPTN and their fathers are datos. Their fathers are dato, and how can that be?
Because you brought up a very important point, because for PTPTN, there's no means test associated. When my father was Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, I was accepted in Petronas University, and automatically I was offered a scholarship. Like automatically, there's no sort of review how much my father earned, and most ministers, once their children make a certain particular grade, they will automatically get scholarships. And I completely agree with you. That has to stop. So I managed to, thank God my father rejected the scholarship then. But my point is, the means tested is a key feature, and it has to be a key feature for any future sponsorships under PTPTN or any student loan program. Number two, I highly doubt that they have actually the ability, or they want to enact the political will to ensure they know exactly how much people are paying, how much people who can afford to pay, and so on and so forth. Because if not, why are we even talking about this now? So many of them are listed in CTOS, the blacklist, and it's ridiculous. At 1 year, this is a Auditor General's report. I'll get it out to you. I raised this 4 years ago, I think. They found thousands of PTPTN records. Basically, the data has been deleted because it got wet in the rain in the storage department. So names of students, who are eligible or not. So my issue is, I think we can even agree on that point. If they have the data, you should be able to know how much each former PTPTN, recipient actually earns. That would be so important for us to ascertain how much their parents make. But because it's so, I guess, open to corruption, there's many ways to basically hide the fact. And again, goes back to credibility. Goes back to those guardians who are supposed to protect the system, protect loan holders. They're not really dispensing with their jobs judiciously. So it's a big problem. I mean, you work in a corporation before. You know how the human resource department works, right? If there's anyone who's able to pay the officers and say, man, I need a leg up. I mean, how does it affect the company as a whole? So similarly, when you have thousands of documents, I mean, the recipients burning or just basically deleted for the years, I think we can't implement many things. But I agree, that means tested is a key feature. And we have to begin with issuing future loans and rejecting it for those who have, well-to-do parents. So it factors in. And in fact, you might have to lower some of the qualifications, for orang asli families. For example, their children. Because they come from far-flung out areas. You can't expect them to get 10 A's. Like Huda did. Huda got 11, sorry. So there has to be some degree of means tested that takes into account lower income groups, the lack of achievements. But of course, basically they have to get at least 8 A's, for example, or 7 A's, from the rural hinterlands of Sarawak. That is a key feature. So I completely agree, and it could probably have to be done in transition in phases. But for now, we have to be clear. I don't think the government is looking at the data with eyes wide open.
Actually, I just want to add that I agree with what you said. I will raise it with the youth leadership because it was something that they announced. So I think they should hear this out. But I think I'm attracted to what Azwa mentioned earlier when it came to GST, for example, and maybe that is one possible approach in terms of resolving the problems that we face, not only with PTPN, but actually you shouldn't be surprised, like in terms of the arrears that people who stay in public housing projects owe to DBKL. I think there's something between 60 to 80 million ringgit that's owed, if I'm not mistaken. I don't have the latest numbers, but that means that there's some people, I've been to DBKL, where like a person is trying to appeal to pay back, like basically this person hasn't been paying rent for 10 years. So how is it that you have a system, just like what Riza mentioned just now, where you have records but you have very poor enforcement? But I think one way to solve it, like what Azwa mentioned, when it came to GST, maybe we need to rethink kind of like a one-size-fits-all. But if, for example, when it came to PTPN, a multi-tiered system to solve a lot of these problems based on what are the realities that you face. What are your socio-economic realities? So if you were, for example, earning a certain amount, then you agree to make certain payments. If you're lower, maybe we have to think it through. But I agree, it's not a we can't go for a one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to PTPN. So I differ from a larger number of the youth leadership when it comes to this matter. Thank you.
So you are saying, Fahmi, you are together with Azul, pro-GST.
No. I mean, in terms of the tier, thinking of having a solution.
I think you have to be decisive. Yes,
No. Let me just clear. I wasn't talking about GST, I was talking about PTPN. A multi-tiered system to resolve the problems faced by PTPN as an institution, and how do you solve the different types of people who owe money to PTPN. I wasn't talking about GST, but I was referring to the approach that Azwa was taking.
We had a budget last year. Our last year budget was basically stated that we're going to zero rate GST, and our bigger problem is with no access to mainstream media. Everyone kept saying, people in the electorate just cannot. Majority who are here probably will understand, but a lot of the areas in whether Kedah, Johor, they just feel that it's either mansuh GST or not. It's a really post-Trump pressure cooker area where people just want to hear everything being said in a particular 140 characters. That's also a big problem for us. We really have to do a lot of thinking, because at the end of the day, already PAS is no longer with Pakatan Harapan. It's a huge problem. So I would say the opposition has been united. I mean, how else would you get a former Prime Minister who's, part of the reason why most of us were in prison, but now has to embrace a reform agenda, coming together with all the parties. And there's 4 of us forming Pakatan Harapan. Yet, to the electorate, without PAS, then you're divided. I would argue, no, we have united all forces, to the best of our ability. For those who want to help UMNO and win, what can we do? But my point is, again, so there's so much disillusionment, there's so much confusion. We really need to drive home the key messages. And Ronnie's absolutely right. And having a stable coalition that works together to present its own budget, present its own manifesto is very important. And at the end of the day, like I said, we do want to welcome stakeholder engagement, feedback, because that's what we're about. If we want to return the same era where the government knows best, I think we're in the wrong business. It's really time to bring Malaysia, we talk about 4th industrial revolution, whatever revolution per se. If you don't have a government that listens and engages, you're going to lose everything. Yes, Azra as well.
Although I don't really agree with the proposal to abolish GST, I think everybody knows that, and I think we should tweak it to make it more progressive.
Yeah.
I do agree with what was said in the Pakatan Harapan's budget for 2018. The fact that a lot can be done in terms of savings. You can recoup a lot from savings, and also elimination of leakages and wastages. Okay. Just look at all the components of the operating expenditure, and one component appears quite prominently, which is supplies and services.
Okay.
This component is the 2nd largest component of the operating expenditure. Number 1 is, of course, emolument. We cannot touch that, right? And the 3rd largest component is retirement charges or pensions and gratuities. We cannot touch that. So what we can do is we can touch supplies and services, which is the 2nd largest component of operating expenditure, and another component, which is the 4th largest, is debt service charges. Okay.
Oh my God, yeah.
Okay. So let's look at debt service charges. If we manage to reduce public debt amount today, so subsequently we will have less. We should be able to slash debt service charges in the future. That is number 1. Okay. And number 2, supplies and services, and that's where we can do most of the things. Okay. Next year, this component is expected to be about 14.4% of total expenditure, compared to 14.8% projected for this year. So this is where value for money, maximization and cost savings initiatives, as well as efforts to eradicate or at least minimize wastages, leakages, and also corrupt practices. So we really need to look into this component. So that's where I would say that's where the money is. I mean, in terms of saving it, not wasting it. Okay. And back to education, I think we should consider education as an investment, not as a cost. So if we have that mindset, so we wouldn't mind, and we would do anything possible to make it accessible to the many. Okay. However, I understand that, well, definitely we have constraints, financial constraints, right? So again, like I said just now, we can introduce multi-tiered system even to this one. For example, for for children, for students who come from families below a certain income level, education should be free for them. And for those whose family earns between whatnot to whatnot, they should pay a little bit. And for those higher should pay a bit more, something along that line. And later, when these students finish their studies, they will have to repay. And we should make it possible for them to start repaying only if their monthly salary reaches a certain level. For example, we can introduce something like a PTN recipient should start paying only and only if he or she earns at least 5,000 a month, something like that. So we can think something along that line to make it something more practical. But whatever it is, free education for the poor below certain whose family earns below a certain level of monthly income, that should be the case.
I have a question.
Maybe we take a few questions.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so part one, as you mentioned, a former prime minister and another deputy prime minister is now part of the opposition. If after the next general election you all take over Putrajaya, is it going to be same old, because we just had the same players just change the team t-shirt, you know? And second part of the question is, if in power, what will we as the Rakyat see in the first 1 year? What will we see, not just in terms of the budget, as in terms of economy that we're talking now, but in terms of civil liberties, freedom of the media, all the things that have been eroded over the past few decades. In fact, I would say we are in this position because of the former Prime Minister. Will we see that change? How fast will it take place? What will that first honeymoon 365 days be like?
You want to for that first? Yeah.
That's on the
I
transition.
think whatever it is
Yeah.
government, GST, everything else, I think the message must always be very consistent amongst the coalition partners. That's one. Number two, talking about this current budget, I mean, it's obvious it's a sham budget. And I think not only that, it's a very irresponsible budget. And we're talking about your alternate budget. Let's be honest, not only Pakatan Harapan, anybody can do any worse as it stands, But my point to you, for me, is this: out of this current budget propagated by this current government, and it's obviously election budget. They want to get as much sway as they can. But out of it also, I can see there's a lot of iniquities there. There's a lot of issues that you can pick up with. I think this is an opportunity for Pakatan Harapan, and you being the communication director of PTR. How would you want to exploit, this adverse, for example, what you're talking about, so many different kinds of budgets, but it is not being accounted, it is not being accompanied by any proper accountability. And that's very important. It's not transparent. So now I think these are advantages that you could actually take advantage of, because at the end of the day, whatever we want, we just can't afford to have this government again. So you guys really have to make sure that you must ram through this message home effectively and win the next elections. Otherwise, we are doomed. Okay.
I just came from the forum just behind here. Yes. I shared my concerns with Fahmi earlier, but I'll just share it with everyone. There were 4 economists: Jomo, Tan Sri Sharif, formerly the Treasury, Dr. Zul with Amanah, as well as Dr. Rosli, formerly with Central Bank. Yeah. So what the 3 of them From the off, the three of them were the offensive, and Dr. Zul was defending Pakatan Harapan. And what they said was this: they tore PH alternative budget to shreds. They completely ripped it apart. Ripping apart is actually a very nice way of putting it for me. They were not diplomatic at all. And they were saying essentially the difference between Najib's budget and Harapan was two things: minimum wages and GST. Every other part of it, if one were to say PH budget was so to speak, populist, Najib was more populist. That was the difference. So essentially, the point driven home was there is no concrete alternative economic plan or vision for the country from Pakatan Harapan, which is why the messaging is not clear. That was what came up from the forum. And I find that argument hard to counter, because that is the view shared by people not only on the ground, but people who are working as economists, as advisors to the coalition as well. How would you try to, do you think that's real, or it's not a real feeling? And two, specifically on the Prime Minister's budget, or the PMO, in the alternative budget it is said that you will reduce corruption by 20 billion. How do you quantify that amount? Because that amount relates completely to cutting out GST and then replacing it with the SST, which is what we had before. And the SST income is only less than half GST. Dr. Sri Anwar has already said, for me, he pointed out just now that we have a serious problem of government revenue. Besides income tax, which is dropping, where else are we going to get the money from?
Okay. Maybe you can answer.
Yeah, I can answer the Ellen's question on the second part of this question.
When do we expect 1 year, first year?
I'll answer that.
Okay, the first question in terms of the former PM, Deputy PM, I think we also have to be quite cognizant of the fact that we're going to have players from Pakatan Harapan, the original three, whether it's leaders from Keadilan, DAP, and also Amanah. And it's not going to be Mahathir that's leading behind the steering wheel, because like it or not, he's going to be forced to stay true to the pledges made in the reform agenda, not necessarily economy, because I think economy is going to look that every week we actually have finalized and concretized our position, whether it's to reform the issue of eradicating corruption, civil liberties, as you mentioned. I basically prepared a couple of bills, private members' bills, as a member of parliament since 2010. They will never see the light of day, but my point is I really would want to have it ready, this legal reform blueprint, because you have to have these fundamentals and foundations on standby, so to ensure the first 100 days you fix that first. Yeah. Indonesia's democracy stands on the basic foundations that Gus Dur and Habibie built in the early years. So to abolish the Printing Presses and Publications Act, that's done. To ensure that there's a media council governing the publication of media outlets. That's important. The amendment that needs to be made to the Petroleum Development Act. Because right now, Petronas, for example, the government and the Prime Minister has full controls of Kumpulan Wang Amanah Nasional, which is the petroleum fund. Yeah? So it's supposed to be used for the future generation. Instead, it was used to build Putrajaya. So, like it or not, of course, I must say this, right? From the beginning, you can't whitewash history. And Mahathir has to be accountable, really responsible for the Malaysia that we see today. But I think you also have to take heart that he has fully embraced the reform agenda. In the meetings that we've had, he has allowed us full control over some of the key things that we're demanding. I think when he came together to basically go against the imprisonment of Maria Chin, sitting on the sidewalk, protesting the abuse of the Prevention of Terrorism Act, really says a lot. I feel that Malaysia needs to heal. We do need to forge and move forward. It's important to learn from the past, but it's dangerous to basically succumb to the past. And I think we have to start thinking, what can we do better? This nation has been polarized for so long. based on our race, based on our religious differences, even based on our politics, and it's really disgusting. So I always said, even for Najib, if he decides today to embrace the reform agenda in entirety, and make sure the perpetrators who are busy flying about and enjoying their yachts, pay out, I think we have no issues about accepting him. But it has to be the way. I mean, you can have a Truth and Reconciliation Committee, which was mooted by the NUCC at one time. I even brought that bill to be introduced in Parliament. None of it will be called by the Speaker. It's only RDU 355, A to Z, again, blah, blah, blah. So, it's a good question. I think, but to say that we're just changing jerseys would completely be an insult for those who have never joined UMNO. I've never been part of UMNO. I'm a proud carrying member of Keadilan, a multiracial party, and I believe Fahmi joined also, and I think we really are in it to change Malaysia to the future that will be safe and secure and fair to my kids, to his Noah. So I think that's what it's important to understand. Now, I'll ask Fahmi to mention this first one because it's really into the manifesto committee week by week. And of course, back to JJ's questions. JJ, I have had extensive discussion with Jomo. And I think it's important. We have to be humble enough to really take into account people who love us, people who want change, but really want us to get our act in order. But having said that, we shouldn't ignore the challenges that have come our way. It's been very difficult. I think for many opposition movements, you've had your opposition leader imprisoned. Put aside the fact that he's my father, he's in prison. Many of them facing charges, those who have been involved in exposes, different scandal after scandal. There's always that pressure, and in a democracy it's as flawed as us. But having said that, I believe it's the best time to include whether it was Wawa's opinions tonight, whether it's Jomo's opinions, and remember this, when I talk about an alternative vision, in 2006, we came out with a new economic reform agenda. So at the time, most of the issues looking at how our progression has stopped after first being in the ranks as Taiwan, South Korea, even Singapore. I think it is very crucial to learn from that we were at one point at par with these economies, right? And understanding what are the key weaknesses in our economy and our politics. In fact, even taking into account some of the banking laws are quite archaic to meet the needs of Malaysia's growing economy. Yeah? So I go back to the Malaysian Economic Action Committee. They came up with Malaysia's economic agenda, reform agenda, the new economic blueprint, 2010. And it was a brilliant document. I remember we were very happy. They included a lot of our thoughts. It came out from many economists who came together in the action committee, spelling out what should be done, whether it's the issue of reducing foreign workers, whether it's downsizing government. Yeah, everything was in there. But you needed a political will to enact most of these challenges. Yeah, put aside the budget. I think let's be clear. There's a lot of weaknesses. We need to learn. We need to improve. But to completely shelve it and say that we have no particular agenda would be unfair to Pakatan. I remember it was me, Jomo, and Mahathir. We were talking about the issue of China's investments in Malaysia and comparing with the experience of Sri Lanka and many other economies. Sorry, Azra as well. Yeah, Azra as well. Yeah, don't be upset. I just remember Jomo. So basically, at the time, someone was asking Mahathir. So if Proton with this joint venture Geese, are you going to come up with a new national card? And before he could say much, I stopped him there and said, it is time for us to basically include real economists into the discussion and ensure whatever policies we come up with, it will meet the needs of the economy, of the electorates, and not necessarily on our egos. And I think that's how it should be done. So I would go back to that document, the economic blueprint, reform blueprint. There's a lot of things that have been said there, and the first 100 days would have to also be clear-cut, ways to safeguard, the economy. So I think that would be quite a clear vision of what we want to do. Dr. Lee Boon Chai, Member of Parliament from Gopeng, our famous cardiologist, the best in Gopeng, amongst the best in Malaysia. We basically hailed up and said, Najib, you're really serious about implementing this. You're going to have the backing of the opposition. But then Prakasa and Ibrahim Ali came to the picture, and we are here today. So yeah, I will probably see the economists again, and we have to be open. We have to, rise from the ashes, from our alternative budget ashes, and be the phoenix that the people need. This is 2017, people, and I think we have to be not just confident, but have the ability to be leaders, to listen, engage, and be humble when needed.
If I may add.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
More than just something.
You were saying the new economic blueprint.
New economic model.
No. Oh, new
2010.
New
2010. It came about by the Malaysian Economic Action Committee. Yeah, Action Council.
Oh, that is AEM.
Yes.
But if I was thinking, Dr. Sri Anwar came out with...
He came out earlier, in 2006, similar. 2006 was the time we sent it out, yeah. Yes, Agenda Economy Malaysia.
Alright. So, I think to move forward, Pakatan Harapan, especially kajian leaders, would have to review and update that new economic agenda by Dr. Anwar Ibrahim.
Okay.
Review and update before you come up.
Before his freedom,
Not before you come up with a manifesto. Do it fast. Do
that,
and include everything that can reform the Malaysian economy fully. Then we can come up with a good manifesto.
I can send you the copies in there.
Alan's second question about what are we going to do with the first 100 days. Actually,
First year.
I know, but specifically the first 100 days, because Pakatan Harapan Presidential Council, when we announced the top leadership lineup as well as our logo, already announced about 5 or 7 key points. That we need to do, including one of the key things is of course we are committed to, among the things that we're committed to is to have in place the kind of legislation and changes to make sure that the Prime Minister only can hold for office for 2 terms, for example, to kind of put a curb, put a limit to the kind of powers that he or she might have. And not only that, but I think a lot of what you've heard Pakatan Harapan leaders speak about, the Prime Minister cannot be also the Finance Minister, etc., also is in the manifesto. We've recently announced 2 major things. One is on FELDA, the 5 key promises that we want to make about FELDA, including, for example, I can't remember all of them exactly, but we have made an announcement. And then on the 14th of October, we made some key announcements. One of the top things that we want to do is, of course, to catch MO1. And I think this is quite important for a lot of people. At least it brings some kind of, some kind of closure maybe. But I think that is a commitment. It's something that we plan to do. We also announced very recently a slew of reforms that need to take place in order to eradicate corruption, or at least try to reduce it, including making sure that MECC becomes a fully independent body that doesn't sit under the Prime Minister's department, but reports directly to Parliament. And it's this kind of independence that not only do we need to see with institutions to safeguard democracy, such as MECC, but also the Electoral Commission, the Election Commission, and also even Bank Negara. I think Parliament is an untapped source of people's power. And I think we need to make sure that Parliament plays a greater role in providing those kind of checks and balances. Also through the formation of numerous committees to make sure that whether it's judicial appointments, I think we have to go through Parliament, we have to. Because you can't have it down to just one person advising the Yang di-Pertuan Agong or small group of people advising the Yang di-Pertuan Agong. I think we need greater scrutiny, we need greater transparency, and the best place to do that is by empowering Parliament. I think with regards to what Ronnie was talking about, actually we have a lot of things that we would like to communicate on with regards to both the Pakatan Harapan budget as well as what's wrong with the Najib Razak administration's 2018 budget. I think some of it you may have heard if you heard Wan Azizah as opposition leader give a speech on Monday. Now, the interesting thing is that I think the last finance minister who really sat through an opposition leader debate of the budget was Anwar Ibrahim when he was finance minister. After that, like, Najib has never sat through any of the opposition leaders' speeches to debate the budget. So I think that kind of, even in terms of democracy and democratic practice, we are already implementing. And I think the message that's coming out from there is something that we have to propagate. One thing which is quite cool was that when Pakatan Harapan came up with the budget, we created these graphics that had like the 10 key points, right? And then Penang followed suit and Selangor as well. And what we discovered was that it was so, in a sense, popular in terms of reducing, like, 60, 70 pages is quite difficult for people to, infographics is the key right now. So much so, when we came up with a list comparing Pakatan Harapan's budget and what the BN budget copied, the BN cyber troopers copied our infographic to make their own, and they've been doing that. So at least from a communications point of view, I think we're doing something right if they have started to copy us. Today, I think it was Zahid Hamidi who presided over 1,000 cyber troopers who came together, and I'm wondering where does the budget for this come from? So I think, for example, the communications ministry is getting something like 2 billion ringgit, and then wow, I wonder how much of that is going to all these kind of activities. So I think those are some of the things. I think JJ was answered already. Okay.
So without that budget, are you going to win? I mean, I'm very encouraged and heartened by your comments, by Iza's comments. For taking to retire. Fantastic. If we can do that, that's wonderful. But like I said, the way things are going right now.
That's where I hope all of you.
After 6 years of UMNO, we've had enough.
Another 10 years of.
So we are very concerned whether you guys can give us the confidence that we can win.
So here's where I come in and say, okay, thanks Rani for bringing us exactly to the point. So those of you who are here tonight, you are all agents for change. Whether it's Daniel who opened up the space for us, or those of you who spent a good deal of the evening listening to us speak about this. Please, after this, Shafiq, open up a computer and make sure everybody registers. And if you are staying here, if you are voting here, if you are staying here but voting elsewhere, please change. You still have time. Otherwise, someone else is going to change for you. Change your voting place before somebody else comes in. Right? Habis dah ke belum?
Oh, saya I'm too answer.
Exactly. So we sincerely hope that tonight you've heard a lot of our comments, a lot of ideas. Please, from here on, we need your assistance, any whichever way, whether it's in terms of few ringgit or a few hours of your time over a weekend, to become a polling agent or a counting agent, or to convert your family members who are staying here but they've not yet registered to vote. Please get them involved in that process. Inshallah, God willing, we will be conducting a lot more of these kind of meetings with and without kind of like Facebook Live and stuff like that. But stay engaged with us in this conversation. One thing that we've discovered is that it's really important that you give us this kind of feedback so that we can go back and inform our party leaders and Pakatan Harapan leaders what is it that people really feel about about a lot of things that we're saying, about the budget, yeah? And you know, not just listening to the experts. But there's one thing that I feel is quite important that I feel maybe we can reactivate, something that we can propose, is to convene kind of like, maybe we get, you know, if Pakatan Harapan were to win, yeah? If there's no massive cheating and there's no massive redemulation, which may happen as early as next year, it could happen, is that maybe we can call together all of these economists and come and help us figure out what we need to do. You know, we have the plan, we have the political will, but maybe we need more insight. Yeah. So that's maybe one of the things that we do. Maybe some parting words.
Yeah, just remember one thing. My concern is about the turnout. So every Malaysian who cares about the future would have to turn out and vote. Our problem is, if you talk about UMNO members, they will come out, you know, all of them will make sure they come out and cast their votes because it's about their survival. You know, they don't care, they can't care less how corrupt leaders or their president or whatever. For them, it's an issue like similar how the Republican Party decided on the last elections. They can't care less. I mean, they just proceed clear cut. And of course, past members will also come out. And I think we have to make sure that, you know, we come up in full numbers in the next elections. That's my concern, because once people feel that you know, it's useless, there's no need to change, there's no need to care. I mean, no one ever said a particular struggle will be easy. And I think we've made so much gains over the years, whether it's through the 2008 elections, no one thought it would win 5 states. And we had many analysts coming here and saying without control, even access to the media, people still had that readiness to embrace change. And now we have 2 states for people to compare with. Do you remember a time before 2008 that people actually looked at the development and success of states and compared them with one another? I think that's a huge improvement in how electorates can compare and can choose a government. I'm not saying that we've done you know, a wonderful job so far, but we've done well. We have to improve, of course. You know, we have to do a lot better. And I think that's the hallmark of why the march towards change requires everyone to come together. And if you haven't registered, you know, I'm going to be very upset. I remember in Kedah, I'm like, you know, most of the Bersatu members are young, right? And I'm like, dudes, have you registered to vote? And they're like, still belum. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to throw things at you, but just make sure you register. And for Hillary, a lot of the younger voters in the US elections, 46% who are mostly young voters who are eligible did not register to vote. Did not come out to vote. And for the US, it's a lot better because you just come, you can immediately vote. Malaysia, of course, have to wait for months, right? Because our system is so superior. So because of that, we have to ensure everyone, you know, makes it count, makes it to the polling booth and cast their vote. That's about our future. And have you registered? Yeah, of course. Okay, thanks. Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for coming to the
Thank you for all 3 panelists.